Hey, welcome to Ask for Help. We're on the wrong input, of course. There we go. It's just me this week. Welcome to Ask for Help. And this is our TFL live stream that we do every Sunday. If you're new here, drop yourself into the subscribe button and make sure you turn on notifications so you get notified every time we do one of these live streams. Now, today we're going to be talking about our experiences, because I kind of feel like this when this is kind of how I feel, left in the dark. When I'm out looking for a brand new printer or I'm buying another printer to add to my collection, or I'm, researching and I'm not sure what I want to research. And then I'm feeling in the dark about everything that I've got to do. So with everything that is going on in the world currently and the lack of new technology moving forward, which is a pretty safe bet when you're looking for a new printer. If you're inexperienced and you're new to the hobby and you want to maybe say get a second printer because you don't feel the printer you got has enough build volume for you, where do you turn? Do you turn to the internet? Do you turn to forums? Do you turn to a friend, a colleague? Where do you go? And a lot of what I've experienced when I got into this, because it was kind of the same thing for me. And I want to hear about your experiences today when you were getting into the hobby and looking for your first printer. I want to hear all about it, and Jerry's going to be putting up your questions on the board today. So when I was getting my first printer, as a lot of you already know, was a Hicktop 3DP08. Now, it was your standard 8 or 200 by 200 by 200 build volume on an acrylic frame, with an 8-bit ramps board that was not very good. It was one of the cheaper ones that was made. But, when I got that, I really didn't know a ton about 3D printing. And I put it together, and I'm pretty mechanically inclined, like a lot of you are, pretty mechanically inclined. Put it together, everything seemed to be, going well, but for whatever reason, I couldn't get the bed to level. And I went to the internet and tried to find, videos back then on leveling your bed, and that was impossible. And then I ran into another situation where nothing was coming out. I got a clogged nozzle basically, and there was nobody out there doing what I needed or helping me to solve that problem. So eventually I learned on my own and found, what I know today. Ben says, I watch a lot of YouTube review videos. I do too. Watching YouTube review videos, however, is just that. It's a review. And that I try not to do reviews on this show, even though I probably should go after more reviews. But the reason I don't is because if I tell you to go out and buy something, and this has happened to me in the past on this show, if I tell you that this is a great machine, go out and buy it, and it turns out to be a POS for you, then the first person you're going to go and look at is the guy who suggested it to you, right? And then you're going to go back to where you bought it and say that this doesn't work or that doesn't work, or maybe where you bought it is online and you can't do that. Who do you turn to troubleshoot? And that's what we're going to get into a lot today. Is I want to talk about who do you turn to when you troubleshoot, and what were your experiences when you were looking at a printer for the first time, or maybe looking at a new printer today. My brother Raymond, a great example. He came by, or he actually phoned me and asked me about the current printer that he set up this week, seeing as he's been quarantined at home. And we had a long discussion about it, and he was looking at a Prusa, and he was looking at other brands as well. And Prusa, for the money, isn't really worth the money anymore. I'd still say it's up there, but I don't think it's worth what they're asking for it. I think they could drop that price down, especially on the S3 or the 3S. But other than that, Creality's good, and there's a lot of other companies that have come and gone. I mean, if you want to spend the ultimate North American money, you're going to spend it on an Ultimaker more than likely, or a Prusa. Those are the two that you're going to probably gravitate to. And I know a lot of people that have Ultimaker 3D printers. I don't own one myself, but I know a lot of people that do. But Ben says, my first 3D printer was a DaVinci 1.0A. And I'm not familiar with that printer at all, but I sure would love to see pictures of it. Post pictures of that over on our Facebook page, if you wouldn't mind. Here's one from Tim Stockel. He says, hey, First Layer, I have a problem with my CR-10. I have put in a CR-V 2.2.1, and use the tutorials for getting setting up Marlin. However, the part cooling fan's not working. The part cooling fan probably is plugged into the wrong fan outlet. There are several fan outlets on that board, and you just have to make sure that you plug it into the right one. There's some really good documentation on that with pictures. All you do is just do a search for CR10 upgrade to the V2 2.2.1, and there's some very clear images on it. I believe it's not the first one that is the power managed. It's the second one, because they're stacked on one another, if I remember right. So if you go and look at that, try that, and if that doesn't work, then you may have a faulty fan too. Your fan may have gone out on you, which is not unusual. They get little surges and they can burn out because they're not very good fans to begin with, if it's still a stock fan. All right. Can you please explain how the whole Voron concept works? This is from Sheldon Grant. Can you recommend an all-inclusive place to get one? Well, there are lots of kits out there, and the FormTech one seems to be the one that a lot of people are buying right now, because it literally comes with everything but the 3D printed parts. It's an added cost if you want to get the 3D printed parts. So the problem there lies in you're still going to need the parts printed. If you can buy the parts, sometimes depending on where you buy them, if you're buying them off of eBay or off a forum or anything like that, you're probably going to pay too much for them, and you're not going to get a very good quality print out of that. If you subscribe to the Voron Discord, I believe the Voron Discord has an area for people to get the parts that they need for a flat fee, I think of $100 US, which is about 123 Canadian. So that's where you're going to have to look for that. And now how to explain the concept of the Voron. The Voron, I wasn't the designer, of course, but there are plenty. Nero 3D does a lot of Voron stuff, and he's really good at explaining this. But I'll do my best. It is what's termed as a Core XY. So what happens is the X and the Y are still moved on belts, but they move in unison. So the belts are always going to be moving the top and the bottom belt, which is controlling the X, or pardon me, the X and the Y of that. Now, in a Voron, because it's not what we typically call a bed slinger, the bed is dedicated and it's stable and it doesn't go anywhere. The whole carriage for the X and the Y rise up and down. So that's where your movement is going to be. And the way that they've designed this machine is that it's very robust so that you can run your 3D printers at a higher speed of 120 millimeters per second. So more than double what you're going to do on a standard CR10 or an Ender 3, which you should be in about that 40 to 60 range, somewhere in there for your speed, depending on which one you're using. Now, what makes the Voron so special for the price? Well, it's a large volume printer for one. You have 250 by 250 cubed. You have 300 by 300 cube and the 350 by 350 cubed build areas. So you can do a lot of stuff on them. That being said, the other beauty of it is that you can print just about any material out of the box with these machines because they're fully enclosed. They have a draft system to move air out and move air through the machine, but not to affect those high temperature materials causing warping and layer separation because it's fully enclosed. Now, the other nice thing about them is they're quiet and they don't rely on the 32-bit architecture of the board that controls all the motors to do the heavy lifting. And that's where a lot of manufacturers fall down, is because all of that information is being routed through the one board. In terms of the Voron, it's a Raspberry Pi that does all the heavy lifting, and it's just sending data to the boards telling it how to move. So the board is just basically a pass-through in a lot of ways. So that's pretty much what you're looking at for in terms of Voron. I hope I answered that question about the concept and how it works. Okay. Okay. Can you put it up on screen for me? Okay. Checked it triple and tried it all ports and still not working. I have swapped fans 3 times and it's not the case. Okay. If you've swapped the fans, check your slicer. Make sure that you've got the cooling fan turned on, because it won't come on if it's not turned on. So try that. Other than that, I don't know really what to tell you. Recently, there's an issue with Marlin, that Marlin assigns the ports wrong, and that there's a sort of a bug. Do you have any idea how to figure out the port and reassign it? Here's what I would do. I wouldn't go messing around in Marlin. I would download the hex file, which is available from Creality for your machine with that board, or for that board specifically. Load it up and see what happens, because I believe that is going to be your problem. I've never heard of a issue in Marlin, but I can look into that a little bit more this week. Jerry will write that down, and I'll look into it and maybe do a quick video on it for you guys. So what's next? Here we go. World Planet Gadget. I want to get a resin printer and look a lot of reviews. So a lot of different printers, so I know even more. Here's the thing about resin printers. It all depends on what you want. What do you want to do with resin printer? I don't suggest resin printers for everybody, and I'll tell you why. Because they're messy. There's chemicals. There's other things that you have to do to post-process. While I love the resolution and I love what comes off of it, you're limited a lot of times to your budget, because that will dictate what size of print volume that you get. Now, if you're looking at something with a much larger print volume, double what the standard is, then you're looking at some big bucks. Now, and you're looking at a lot more resin, the potential to waste more resin. So if you're looking at doing, things like figures for your tabletop wargaming, or terrain pieces, barrels, that kind of stuff, all the little knick-knacky stuff that you would need for Dungeons and Dragons or anything like that, it's a great printer for that. It's a great printer for doing statues, and I've showed that before. Like this piece right here was printed on a resin printer. And so there's not a ton of prep work that I have to do after that, but I still have to rinse off all of the excess resin that might still be on the surface that's just clinging. I have to rinse that off in alcohol or some other cleaner. Then I have to make sure I'm wearing gloves. Some of the resins really stink. Yes, I have a two resin printers right here in the background, but there's a lot more post-processing that goes into it. The slicing is pretty much the same as you're going to do with any other slicer. You're going to slice it, and it's going to give you your layers, and you tell it what resolution and how fast or slow to go. Where you're going to watch things more is on the exposure times. You want to make sure that you have all of those parameters set prior to starting your print, because if you save a file that's not correctly done for the material that you're using, then you're going to end up with either a failed print, an over extruded model per se, lots of artifacting. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong. So what would I recommend if it were me to a beginner using a resin printer? I would probably recommend a Creality resin printer or the Phrozen Sonic Mini 4K, which is a really nice little printer. Next. Dennis Kelly, he says, I haven't had a BL Touch, but my Creality Touch has been working great so far. Excellent. The Creality Touch, like the BL Touch, are very, very similar. There's a few differences in them. The BL Touch is kind of what got all of that probe started, that probe setup started. They've done a really good job. You know, it kind of reminds me of E3D. When they came out, everybody copied them, started copying them because they were open source. Now, the same kind of thing went with the BL Touch. A lot of people started coming on board. There was the Easy Touch, and then there was now the CR Touch, and there's a couple of other touch sensors out there. But still, I always gravitate back to the original BL Touch. Yeah, it might cost me a couple bucks more, but the steps forward that they've made in the hardware and the software are so much better than some of the other ones, the knockoffs that are coming out. What's next, G? Hello? Oh, there we go. What kind of hot end comes in a CR-10 V3? I'm trying to find a printable hot end cooling system. In the V3, I believe it's similar to the E3D V6. It looks almost identical to an E3D V6, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's the one that comes in it. Raymond Cleveland, I installed the Creality Touch when I built my Ender 5, and it works awesome. He's getting good prints now. I saw some of his pictures the other day, and they look good. He needs a bigger benchy, though, because the shark is getting up on the back. If anybody has seen that model, it's basically the benchy. It's being pulled into the water by a big shark, and every time I see it, it reminds me of Jaws, and that's supposed to be what it does. So you need a bigger benchy. Sheldon Grant, he says, I've been running into issues of corners lifting in prints on my CraftBot 3. Any suggestions? Check your temperatures first and foremost. Sometimes you'll have to bring that bed up. If you're getting curling on the corners where it's lifting, that's because it's shrinking too fast. So two things can be going on there. The bed temperature could be too low, which I would bump it up about 5 degrees or so, just to get into that area. Once you find that it's sticking to the bed, and I've heard of this where some people have had to go up to 70 degrees to keep the material stuck to the bed. And it's also going to depend on the material that you're using. If you're using ABS on a fully enclosed machine, your bed should be at around 100 to 110. If you're doing PETG, you want to be in that 80 to 90 range. And if you're doing PLA, you should be in that 50, 60 range on the bed. Now, the other possibility is that you've got cooling happening. And when your cooling fan, depending on the material, if you're using PLA, you want to have that part cooling fan on. But if you're using ABS or you're using PETG, you want a little bit of cooling, but ABS you don't want any. And that all those factors can cause what we call shrinkage. And that's why you get that lifting, because things are shrinking too fast. So check those things, and if you have any more problems, let me know about it, Sheldon. Next, Jerry. Is there any more? Oh, there we go. I was here last time and asked about little holes in my prints, and you said retraction. I dialed it up, but I'm still getting little holes. The holes are where the seam is, so do you know?
Do not know. Do you know what to do?
Yeah, thank you. The woman who can't spell is telling me how to read. So if you're getting it on the seam, you're getting those holes on the seam. So that means it's pulling too much material in, or it's moving too fast because not enough material is coming out. You want to dial your retraction down, not up. You want to dial it down so that more material is sitting closer to the exit of that nozzle. Try that and send me a message. Here, let me pull this up. Here we go. If you guys need to send me messages during the week that I can look into, if you do that, send them to questions@thefirstlayer.com. And then I'll get that question and I can look into it and see exactly what might be happening. Now, here's the biggest problem is that if you're getting those holes and you dialed it up, you're pulling way too much material back. So you want to make sure that you're closer to that exit. So you want to drop the amount of retraction. So you're going to dial it down. Heat, again, might be a factor. That could be another factor as well. So just take a look at those things and then drop me a couple of pictures in an email or send them to me on Facebook in Messenger. But that's all I can really tell you about that, because if you're still getting it, it's got to be somewhere in that retraction. What's the best way to lubricate your spline, and what type of grease do you suggest? You're obviously talking about the rails that it rides up and down on, as well as that lead screw. Now, the stuff that I use is white lithium grease. And you can find it anywhere online. It's just white lithium grease. You can also use a silicone grease on that as well, and that will help to lubricate those. Usually how I lubricate that stuff is I will make sure that if it's got roller bearings that are fully enclosed, what I will do is I will squirt a little bit of that lubricant inside the bearings before I put them on those smooth rods, and then I'll just work that in there so that the balls in that bearing get fully saturated. Now, to clean it on the other hand, you want to use alcohol to clean it all off, get all that grease off there before you re-grease any bearing or any rod. And it's the same thing for that lead screw. Just put a little bit of lubricant on there, and it should take out any squeaks that you might have because it might be too dry. Next. She's not paying attention now. It's my fault. What does serial runtime hook error mean? That's a good one. I've never seen it. I'm going to look it up. Let me just look it up. Serial runtime hook. There we go. So here's what it's telling me on serial error code. So this is a serial port issue. The serial VLS and functions. The report generates VLS, and the VLS server priorities and methods can return the following error codes. Refer to the knowledge base for more information. Yeah, this is a serial code. So something's going wrong with the serial connection between your printer and your computer if you've got it plugged in. So a serial hook, runtime hook, they don't really tell you exactly which one it is in here, but looking Raise 3D has come up with it. Serial errors. It's one guy here over on the Stack Overflow website it's a Python serial error. And it has to do with the COM port, and that's the COM port that your computer is assigning to that. There's something, the runtime hook for the amount of data that can travel up and down that line is being blocked or dropped somehow. That's why you're getting that error. So do a little bit of investigation. I'll do a little bit more on the weekend here, or this is the weekend, but I will do a little bit more investigation on that because that's a really interesting error that I've never seen before. But it has to do with your serial port, just so you know. Oh, geez. Yeah, bring that one back up. There we go. I have an A8, I'm sorry, and an FTI3. Frames are acrylic and aluminum, 2020 respectively. Both are basket cases. Thought about a Frankenstein machine, but what? Printer, plotter, Dremel, CNC, etc. Trying for zero spent. 3D Jeff, I would say the ANET and the i3. You could probably do a small CNC with it, but you are still going to need some other parts. You may need some more extrusion. The acrylic frame, garbage that thing as fast as you can because it's not going to last very long. So yeah, definitely I would, I mean, the CNC is probably what I would do. A laser, you could turn it into a laser by removing the head and putting a aftermarket laser on there. Plotter would be a good idea if you wanted to do small things like that. So there's several things that you could do. A superconductor. Anybody here try the Hero Me Gen 6 mounts and duct yet? No, I haven't. I'm looking into trying it, but it's way down my list. If anybody else has any insight on the Hero Me Gen 6 mounts, please, by all means, put it in the chat, and we will we'll bring that up for some more discussion. And hello to you, superconductor. All right. And Jerry's all caught up. Yes. While we're at the bottom of the hour, we've got a couple bills to pay. And by the way, the super chat is turned on. It does help the channel quite a bit. So if you're so inclined, if you're not a member and you'd like to help us, you got something out of today's video, we would certainly appreciate it. Now, this live stream is sponsored by Mars Hydro. Mars Hydro is an indoor horticultural manufacturer and supplier. They supply lights, tents, all kinds of interesting stuff for your indoor horticultural needs, regardless of what you're growing in your tent. But you can be sure that with their products, you're going to get top-notch service and you're going to get the latest technology. So check them out today at marshydro.com. And we thank you to Mars Hydro for their sponsorship of the first layer. All right. Laser Cool Eggbots. How much is a cheap laser head? About $70. I think somewhere in there. What's a good free design software? I'm not a student and I don't want to pay for Fusion 360, 3D Obsession. 3D Obsession, you can still use Fusion 360. I went through this with my brother Ray yesterday. We were talking about this. And while we were on the phone together, he actually pulled it up. And when you're doing the license, you can do it as a hobbyist and it won't cost you anything. But first and foremost, I would recommend Fusion 360. You might want to add Blender to your toolbox as well, and Mesh Mixer. Those are the three that I would recommend to you. Next, Peter Reynolds. Thanks for the parts. They're working great. Really appreciate it. No problem, Peter. I'm glad that they're working out for you. We've got more parts to do for you, by the way, so don't get too ahead of yourself. And what's next, G? The first layer, is it possible to install a speaker to the BTT TFT 35? I don't know. I do not know. I had one around here this morning, but I was cleaning up and I don't know where I put it. But I don't think that you can put a speaker on it. It does have a little piezo speaker, I believe, somewhere on the board. So when you're hitting the buttons, you can hear an audible beep. But yes, there isn't a port, but I believe there's a piezo, and if you can find the actual that on the board, that actual speaker on the board, then you can just desolder it or just solder another speaker to it that will handle the voltage. Fusion 360 will limit you to 10 projects, though. Yes, it does limit you to 10 projects. But you can have stuff in your library. You can only have 10 active projects, but you can have stuff in your library, as far as I know. I don't save my projects in the Fusion Cloud. I save them, when I need them. And if, 10 projects, if you've got more than 10 projects as a hobbyist, you've got a lot of projects. What I would do is I would back those projects up to a hard drive or some other storage medium. And then once that is done, erase them from your folder online. And then just if you need to go back to them and make any changes, you actually have the original Fusion files, and then you can just re-upload that particular one. That's what I would do. Hey, we got ourselves a super chat from 3D Obsession. Thank you very much. That does work in our favor. And he says, I wish physical and mental health to you guys. Love the show. Thank you very, very much, 3D Obsession. We do appreciate your super chat. I'm doing a new super chat button on the Stream Deck. So when we do this next week, you'll hear something even cooler. How do you know just how tight your belt should be? I wonder if mine may have been too tight, but loosening didn't seem to do much. I have lines. What is the optimal belt tension? Usually I go for that when I can hear almost like a bass string on a guitar, the top string on a guitar, when it kind of sounds like that to me, then I'm in that zone. And if your belt looks like it's curling up or bulking up before it goes around that wheel, it's too loose. If it's too tight, what will happen is it will be tough for you to move that because it is too tight, and that belt is being stretched to such a limit that it has now reached its tension, and they will stretch. So just be aware of that. So yeah, I go with that bass, that top string on a guitar, if you know what that sounds like, or get it right in that bass level. That usually helps, and that should get you on your way. D-Dog08, he says, my Axis belt is clicking when the bed moves all the way to the back. It doesn't click anywhere else except the back. That could be, look underneath. There could be something hanging down that's grabbing something as it's going by and causing that click. Like if there's a piece of belt, that can cause that. I've seen it before. Just check underneath. There shouldn't be any clicking. If there is, there might be that your wheels on the bottom, if you're like the printers that we have here, the wheels that hold that carriage onto the extruded pieces, they may be just a tad too tight at that point, or the rods may be too stretched too far apart at the back. So as it gets back to that, it's increasing tension on those guides. So what happens is that you will hear some sort of audible sound. 3D Jeff, Prusa has a belt strain gauge that follows you when a belt is just right, or that shows you when it's just right. Though they provide it as G code, so you'll have to look around for that file. I didn't know that, Doc Martin. Thank you very much for that tip. That's actually a really good tip. Frederick Anderson recently bought an Ender 3v2. I wish the instructions would cover some of the basic maintenance, like checking, applying lubricants, DPZ rod, checking the wheels, belts, and so on. This is something that I've been wanting manufacturers to do for the last 6 years. Most of the info Google can help me find, but it would be nice to have it covered in the instructions. I agree with you. I agree 100%. The problem is that in their mind, it's the hardware. So they don't think that they have to do anything beyond the hardware. Software manufacturers, like Cura and Prusa and Simplify 3D, they have great pages on how to overcome this stuff. But if you're looking for something on a specific machine, chances are you're not going to find it. Now, that being said, what I've done in the past when building machines, and I've kind of gone through this on a couple of the Ender builds that we've done on the show, and there's quite a few of those videos around, is what I like to do is I like to make sure that everything is gliding smoothly. If I have a dropout on anything where it feels like it's getting stuck in a little rut, what I will do is I will turn around and I will loosen up that eccentric spacer, which that's not an eccentric spacer. It did look like one. Here's an eccentric spacer right here. So that's an eccentric spacer. And I would loosen those up to just make sure that I don't have play in the bed or in any of the axis. And then I would start to tighten them just enough so that I don't get those dropouts in any of the axes, X, Y, or Z. Maybe I should do a full video on that. That's actually a great video idea. Thank you very much. We're going to keep that in the vault for our video ideas. Thank you, Frederick. Next. Got nothing. Yeah, nothing with an Ender 5 either. There's one there from 3D Obsession. How's your Voron printing? Are you using it a lot? That's from 3D Obsession. My Voron printing is coming slow. I'm not using it a ton right now at the moment. I haven't been able to get to it. Got a few other things. We're revamping the studio down here a little bit for our shows, and we're trying to make it a little bit more generic for our shows. There will always still be a 3D printer in the background, never fear, because we're going to incorporate 3D printing across into my other show. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So, and I will be bringing that down to show it off at some point in the very near future. Timothy Rico, there's a great question. Can you bring that up, Jerry? What is the opinion on automatic bed leveling? My opinion is I think auto bed leveling works great when you understand how to do bed leveling manually and how to understand offset. If you don't understand any of those concepts yet, and you're always struggling to get a good bed level, somebody may have suggested to you, or you may have seen it online, that if you're having problems bed leveling, get an automatic bed leveler. I'm completely opposite to that. If you're having problems bed leveling, do not run out and buy an automatic bed leveler. Practice, practice, practice. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice. Same thing with 3D printers. How do you get the best looking print you've ever had? Practice. Knowledge. So learn to set that bed properly. Get that offset set properly first. Then, when you're comfortable enough, add auto bed leveling. Because what auto bed leveling does is not literally leveling the bed. It's not doing that at all. It's not moving the bed whatsoever. What it's doing is it's probing different points on the bed. And when it probes those different points, it's looking for dips and valleys, and mountains and valleys, I should have said. And the reason that it does that is it wants to have the head, your tool head, ride up and down over those areas. So if it's too low, it's going to go down into that area to fill it in with plastic so that, you get good adhesion to the bed. But it doesn't literally level the bed. That's a big misnomer. What it's doing is it's creating basically a mesh map of your bed, so it knows how to print the part that you want it to print. But other than that, there's two sides to this coin. I like them. I think they work well. But if you're proficient at being able to level your bed and understand where all your dips and valleys are yourself, you'll never need an auto bed leveler. Practice, practice, practice. I have auto bed levelers on a couple of machines, but everything else is pretty much manual. Alrighty. Richard, you mentioned you started another new channel for different content. Care to share so we can sub and enjoy? Accord XTC, yes. I will share that. The new channel is called Rich Colas, and it is about my journey into using medical herb. Because I suffer from joint pain, I have basically there's nothing left behind my kneecaps. My meniscus pretty much gone. So I'm constantly in pain for that. I have a fused vertebrae in my lower back, which causes me constant pain, migraines. Of course, you guys know that, and I'm an insomniac. So I don't want to take tons and tons of pills because, pills do weird shit to your body over time. And I don't normally swear on this show, but that was the best way to put it. But yeah, that's the new channel. It's called Rich Colas, capital R, capital K, all one word, on YouTube, and you should be able to find it. There's only a couple episodes up there right now. We're working out how we're going to do the episodes. We're starting our grow on that using our big 4x4 tent. And we're going to be using some of the Mars Hydro stuff as well on our 2x2 tent. So yeah, that's what it's about. It's really my journey and my learning how to grow my own medicine, how to understand what's in my medicine, and how to make it work for me. So I hope that was informative enough. I completely agree, Richard. An ABL can only work well if you level the bed well manually. Yeah, and I've said that for the last 4 years. I'm not a huge fan of auto bed levelers because they just add more problems if you don't understand how to level your bed. World Planet Gadget, I have to make T800 and BB8 with my Ender 3, but now I want to make a project with the Marvel Avengers. Therefore, I think I need a resin printer. I'm going to disagree with that, actually. World Planet Gadget, I'm going to disagree with that, and I'll tell you why. I have printed, and they're right here behind me. Let me go grab one. This lovely figure of Han Solo was printed on a Ender 3, and then it was painted, and it's still some work to do. I got some finished work to do. He's not quite there yet, but he's getting there. But this, if I come really, really close, there you go. You see there's virtually no layer lines. There's a little bit in his chest. I got to go back and clean that up. But other than that, if you slow down your printer to about 40 millimeters per second, and you up the resolution to 0.18 or 0.12, you will get a beautiful print every time if you've got your machine tuned well. And I've done the Avengers. I've done the Hulk. I did the Hulk, and that was completely done on an Ender 3. And yeah, it turned out beautifully. And you couldn't even tell that it was 3D printed after I painted it. So that's why I disagree with you needing a resin printer. But I understand why you may want a resin printer just because of the resolution. And there's a good example. But remember, you can't do very big parts on a resin printer unless you get a bigger resin printer, of course. Does the ABL mesh map only affect the first layer to get good adhesion, or is it the whole print adjusted to the bed? I believe it's only the first layer so that you get that good adhesion. So one of the ways that you can actually minimize those dips and valleys is by using glass. I've got a piece right here that needs to be cleaned. But if you use glass, borosilicate glass is usually perfectly flat. It's very rare that you won't get a piece of borosilicate glass that isn't completely flat. And this stuff works great with, three or four little binder clips on it. You're all set to go. And it won't matter a lot of times if your bed has dips and valleys away from the edges. If it does have lower edges and a hump in the middle, you can take the duct tape, the silver aluminum duct tape, and you can actually put that in areas that you feel that are low, and it will help bring things up. Medical herb is amazing. It is criminal that it isn't legal. I use my 3D printer to make my own vaporizer heater. Oh, that's very cool, Quinn.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I would love to learn a little bit more about that. And as far as it being criminal, in Canada, it's legal now to, I don't want to get on a tangent because this is not the right platform, but in Canada, it's legal now to grow your own. In certain provinces, Manitoba, you can't, but I think every other province in Canada, you can. But you're limited to how much you can have per household. Now, when you go into your medical doctor, and your medical doctor gives you a prescription for, then I believe with the right paperwork, you can grow more plants for your medicine. But it's a fine balancing act, because while it is legal to consume recreationally, to own plants, you're limited to exactly how much you can do. And that's fine, because whatever you're going to harvest off 4 plants, it's going to be quite a bit. It's going to last you a while, especially if it's for your own use. Next. Thank you for sharing and have sub. Thank you very much, Accord. I really appreciate that. My Y-axis belt is clicking when the bed moves all the way to the back.
Sorry, I'm on the road.
Oh, I thought I read this one. See, she's got something else going on her screen.
The main one and the ones that I put in here first time.
Ah, I see. She'll get it right. There we go. The small resin printers are perfect size for electric skateboard remotes and Dynavape induction heaters I mentioned. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, they're the perfect size for doing small stuff like that. Absolutely. But again, it's going to boil down to material. How much or what material are you going to use? I know, like the electric skateboard remotes, you can use pretty much any plastic, but over time it does become brittle. So keep that in mind. Jeff, or 3D Jeff, he says, my local glass shop said that they never heard of borosilicate. They've been there since I can remember. I'm 54. They've never heard of borosilicate glass? Then go to a different glass shop, because borosilicate glass is the same thing that Pyrex is made out of. And you might have a Pyrex measuring cup in your house somewhere. Or those big serving trays that are clear glass, they're Pyrex. That is borosilicate glass. And if you can't find one at your local shop, Jeff, just look on Amazon. There's all kinds of glass on Amazon, and they have borosilicate glass made specially for 3D printers. Rover says, what problems have you had when rebuilding a 3D printer? What problems have I had personally? Sometimes it pays to be attentive to what you're doing. Take pictures. Use your phone. Everybody has a camera on their phone. Use your phone. Take pictures of anything before you take it apart. That way you know exactly how it goes back together. I suffered from this a lot when I first got started. I don't anymore. Make sure that you unplug your printer before working on it. Try not to short anything out, but always take pictures. And that way you're going to alleviate a lot of the problems. And try one thing at a time. And if that one thing doesn't work, move on to the next thing to try and solve your problem on your list. Now, if you're having an issue such as I just experienced, I built a printer here the other day. It was a refurb, and I found out that it wasn't firing up. I put the plug in. I knew the plug was in the wall, and it wasn't turning on. So I opened up the bottom, took out or looked at the power supply, and noticed that the little door that saves your fingers from getting electrocuted was up. It wasn't covering all the terminals. So when I put it down, it sparked. And of course, yeah, you can't use it then. You could literally smell something sparked in the power supply. So always unplug it, take plenty of pictures. I replaced that with a power supply. I know that it is the power supply that doesn't work. And so now, of course, I have to buy a new power supply. Frederick, he says, I was surprised that the glass provided with my Ender 3 V2 was not flat. Corners are low. Might try that tape method, trying making it flat. Take the glass off. First and foremost, take the glass off the bed. Put it down on an actual flat surface. If you've got another piece of glass, or you've got a steel table, or you've got a butcher block, something that is perfectly flat, that is perfectly flat, put it on there and find out. Go corner to corner. Sometimes what it is the actual bed underneath that is drooping. It's not the actual corners that are drooping, or the actual glass that's drooping. But check that glass against another table, and then you'll know if it's the glass or it's the actual bed. If it's the bed, heat it up without the glass on it. Take a steel ruler and put it on the x-axis way across, left to right, on the bed, and then slowly turn that like a clock so that you can see exactly where light is coming through when it's fully heated up to the temperature that you want. Where you see that light coming through is where you're going to have to pad the bed, as I like to call it. You're going to pad that with thin little areas of tape. You're not going to put on a whole chunk of tape like that. You're just going to take that and you're just going to make it where that area is low. And don't go right to the edge. You want to leave that a little bit, because if you take that tape and you go right from where it's dark to dark and you're trying to cover that, you're going to notice that it's too high in that area. So you're going to cut it a little bit shorter. Hope that helped you, Frederick. Okay. This is from Superconductor. He says, Marlin also supports a manual mesh mode. Yes, it does. You put the bed on fixed mounts, then adjust the offset manually at each mount using the printer screen. I'll tell you why I don't like this idea of putting it on straight mounts. If you've got a bed that's not moving, fantastic. Like if you're doing something like an Ender 3, fantastic. The reason I don't like putting solid mounts, and I've done printers like that before, and I've done it for clients, is that aluminum plate, because it's so thin, it's only about 3 mils thick, 2 to 3 mils thick, somewhere in there. Different manufacturers, different thickness. When they expand from heat, they all expand differently every time. It's not like steel, where steel will radiate out. You got to understand, because of the way the traces are on the bottom of these beds, is that these beds are going to be doing this all throughout their heating or their expansion of from the heat. When that happens, it's never going to be the same twice. So what you want to do is get it to temp, leave it to temp, let it settle in, then do that ruler trick, and I think it's going to work out really well. Okay, have a CR-10 that I had a hard time keeping the bed level. Added easy ABL and solid mounts and mag flex plate. A8 for 4 years. So not experienced with leveling. CR-10 bed is wavy. Add glass with flex on it. Here's what I would do. First and foremost, if I'm understanding how this is going, here's what I would do. Is the CR-10, adding the easy ABL and the solid mounts, you do have to tell the machine in firmware that it's got solid mounts, and that goes back to the last suggestion. But the other side of that coin is that it's going to expand, and that expansion causes all kinds of problems. And it is that way for each and every bed out there, except if you're getting into those much thicker beds. The Voron, for example, has an 8mm thick bed. Like, it's solid. So when you heat that thing, it heats up evenly across because it's got the thickness to do that. All right, let's do one more because we're almost out of time. Okay. Superconductor, have you ever tried Marlin's manual bed mesh feature? I've been thinking about putting fixed mounts on my Ender 2 and trying that. I've never tried their manual bed mesh feature, and the reason that I haven't done that is because I've never needed to. I've never had a client that's needed to, but I do have a printer that I could test that on, and I will test that this week. Within this week, I hope to get to it. Yes. Either this week or next week, I'll test it, and then we'll do a video on it and show you exactly what that does, because I don't think anybody's really covered that and why and how it works. Okay? All right. So I think that's about it. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your questions today. We just ran out of time. We had a lot of questions today. And I do appreciate that. Now, if you're new here, please consider hitting that subscribe button. I got to do my duty. Hit that like button so it helps us in the algorithm. We've got 45 people watching and only 21 likes today. Wow. Thank you for the super chats. Again, that always goes a long way into helping the channel to keep going forward. Because a lot of times we have to buy our own stuff. And, when it comes to boards and things like that. And now with the chip shortage, boards are few and far between. So, and there's been a lot of boards out there recently that have had problems. So, again, it goes a long way. And your memberships go a long way as well. That being said, we are out of here for today. Thanks to Mars Hydro for their sponsorship of the first layer. And we will see you guys all again next Sunday. And remember that the first layer is always your foundation to a great print. Until I see you guys next Sunday, bye for now.